So in time could mean different things in different environments. But I think if the organisation emerges with a sustainable future, in time would be at a moment where the value destruction was relatively small and there was a recovery back to some kind of health of the organisation as compared to the past. So spotting a turnaround crisis looming in time might be the definition of we can return to full health. So one of the things I've spoken about in the past in these videos is the idea of a transition point where everything the organisation is doing that got it to be successful in the first place, it's still doing those things and the success is not emerging. That is a classic symptom of a transition point, and a transition point, if you can spot it early enough and change things, then of course you can return the organisation back to its full health. Other things that might be clues. There's a creeping incremental financing. This year we had an overdraft and we find that actually that becomes the new normal, that we're up against the maximum of the overdraft. Or we start thinking, well, actually in order to grow, we are thinking about invoice finance, and so we fill up that, and then we have maybe some stock finance or some supplier finance, and the little packets and pockets of financing are growing over time. Actually, if it's a very fast growing organisation and those things are growing quickly, that can be perfectly reasonable. But I think as CFOs, we need to look out at that and say, is the increase in our use of the various pockets of financing that we might have available, is that commensurate with the level of growth that we're getting? The other thing about financing structure is that those types of finance can also mean that a small dip in revenues or a small dip in growth can cause a crisis. Another one is, and this is much, much harder to see for people inside an organisation, and that is the organisation becomes self-referential. The departments in the organisation start to think of the departmental requirements as being more important than the whole. In order to have a successful organisation, I need a bigger budget in order to do better things. And that understanding of what success looks like, not being on the outside of the organisation, but being on the kinds of things that go on inside the organisation. If the key performance indicators are genuinely recognising what people on the outside of the organisation, the finances, the shareholders, the customers, even the suppliers, if what we're measuring genuinely affects the outside of the organisation, maybe everything's fine. We can look at our performance indicators and say, are these genuinely serving us? Because if they're not, it could be a little clue. From that, we might look out for other clues as to, actually, let's look ahead, a long way ahead, and say, are we really focused on the things that matter? And that actually is much harder than it seems, particularly if you've been in an organisation for a long time.